Nintendo fans have been very patient. We've given Nintendo all the feedback any company could ever hope for, and we've supported just about every one of their projects for decades. And what do we get in return? We get ignored, we get radio silence on major issues, and we get prices higher than any other company in gaming. And don't forget, they sue anybody and everybody who dares to wear a Mario hat. This isn't a one-time issue either. This is Nintendo at its core, and it's getting worse by the minute. Let's start with a little game most of you probably know, Palworld. This game took the internet by storm, selling 1 million copies in 8 hours, and 8 million copies in under 6 days. It hit 2.1 million concurrent players on Steam, making it the second highest of all time, only coming in behind PUBG. And this wasn't just some lucky hit. The dev team saw what Pokemon had become, a franchise that's been run into the ground with copy and paste releases and barely any improvements whatsoever. They saw an opportunity to give fans the kind of game that they'd been asking for, and it worked. Just 35 developers made it happen. But Nintendo? Yeah, they weren't having any of that. They started coming after Palworld with everything that they've got. Lawsuits, patents, pressure, everything they had, forcing the devs to change their game. Now let me be clear, I totally get a company wanting to protect its IP. I'm not saying people should just rip off Mario and call it a day. But what Nintendo filed patents for was completely ridiculous. They actually claimed they should be the only game allowed to use a ball to capture and release creatures. And somehow they got away with that. Palworld had to remove the ability to throw a sphere and summon creatures. They even had to take out gliding with your pals because that too was too close to Nintendo's patents. Are you kidding me? How is that something that's patentable? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. What's next? Games won't allow you to have characters who jump because Nintendo owns Mr. Jumpman himself, Mario? It's completely ridiculous. And that whole our way or the highway attitude, it's just in every portion of their business now. Everywhere you look, every game they release, you can see it just seeping out. Let's talk about Zelda for a second. Breath of the Wild came out and it was a great game, an amazing game even. But it did have major flaws. The Divine Beasts, they didn't hit like those classic dungeons. They were far from it actually. The breakable weapons were annoying, and the 100% completion reward, that was like a total slap in the face. And fans made all of that very clear. They were super loud about it for years. So when the direct sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, dropped, what did we get? Did they fix any of that? No, basically the exact same game with a different skin. It's had all the same issues and same problems that Breath of the Wild had. They didn't listen to anything fans said about that game at all. They made it seem like Tears of the Kingdom was going to have much better dungeons and be closer to something like Ocarina of Time or other classic Zelda games, but it ended up being basically the same as the Divine Beast. The only difference was they just weren't Divine Beast. It was still the same thing though, like it wasn't really much of an improvement at all. And the other things were still there as well, still breakable weapons, and still 100% reward that just wasn't worth the time at all. It pretty much wasn't a reward at all. Everything the fans said about Breath of the Wild fell on completely deaf ears. Now I know what some of you guys are thinking, this is all old news, and it is old news, so let's talk about something a little more recent, Mario Kart World. First of all, Tears of the Kingdom was $70, despite reusing a ton of assets from Breath of the Wild, and fans weren't happy about that. And now, a few years later, Mario Kart World cost a whopping $80. That's the most expensive major game on the market. Meanwhile, PlayStation and Xbox, they're still charging $70 max. But fine, let's just say for a second hypothetically that that price was justified. Is the game good? Well, yes and no. The game at its core is good, but its biggest flaw are the intermissions, which is basically a new feature where you drive from one track to the next. The problem is, that counts as your first 2 laps. So whenever you end up at the actual track itself, you only get to race around it for 1 single lap. All in all, maybe a nice creative new idea, but it's terrible for hardcore fans and it's terrible to just play the game on the regular. Most people are going to want to play a traditional track with 3 laps. And for some reason, online doesn't have that option at all. You go in online and you just have to hope you get lucky and a 3-lap track pops up and you can click on it. But more times than not, it's going to be all intermissions and you're not going to get to choose. And that's the part people hate the most, and fans have been begging for them to add in the options since this game came out. And the game has been patched multiple times, and Nintendo just flat out refuses to give us the option to just race a normal 3-lap race in online. It just doesn't make any sense. It's driving people away, and tons of people are going back to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Seriously, like, how embarrassing is that? People are going back to your last game that's like a decade old, and you're just refusing to change the new one because you're just convinced that your new feature is amazing, even though the fans are telling you otherwise. And before I wrap this up, I want to talk about a little something called Joy-Con drift. Probably the biggest example of Nintendo just not caring about its fans at all. Everybody knew that the Joy-Cons were drifting way too soon, way too quick. You drop $80 on these things, and within months they'd be completely unusable. Nintendo didn't say anything, they didn't do anything, they didn't care, they didn't even respond until they got sued and were forced to help the customers with this situation. Before that, they couldn't have cared less. They didn't fix the problem because it was the right thing to do, they fixed it because they had no choice but to do so. There are a ton of other examples I could bring up in this video, but then this video would be an hour long, so I don't want to do that. But let's talk about how and if this will ever change. Personally, I don't honestly see it going very well in the future. I mean, if you look at the sort of CEOs and the higher ups in Nintendo, it seems like, I'm not going to say any names, but some of them not being as involved anymore or sadly passing away, it seems like that's a lot to do with the problems. They're solely focused on making money now, and that's it. And unless they start losing a lot of money, I don't see them changing. And their brand is just too big. It's kind of like Apple. Nintendo is like the Apple of the gaming market. People are just going to buy it. It has Mario on it, and it is the only place for you to play Mario. Therefore, people are just going to keep coming. And even if the mainstream or the hardcore fans get tired of it and they actually do stop buying, which that will never happen, but even if they did, it's still kids, you know, like it's still a children's market, especially with Mario and Pokemon and things of that nature, and parents are going to buy those games for their kids. So I just personally don't think that this is going to change anytime soon, if ever. Instead, let me just ask you guys this. How long do you think Nintendo can keep charging premium prices with broken features, reused content, and completely ignoring the fans who made them successful to begin with? Seriously, they're charging premium prices for inferior products, and they're completely getting away with it. And it feels like they just don't care at all anymore because they know that they can't. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And as always, peace.